Excellent. So once again, I would like to welcome you all to the Young and Brave Mentoring Program. It's always a joy to be able to connect with you and learn with you. Today, we are going to be talking about a very, very, very interesting topic. It's a topic that a lot of people don't talk often because of the stereotype that people have about it. However, it's a very important topic because I believe it affects almost everybody in every community. In every community, there are some people that it affects, no matter what kind of community you belong to, no matter what kind of race you belong to, no matter what kind of religion you belong to. I believe this affects everybody, though a lot of people don't often talk about it. And also, I've observed that the way people deal with it differs. Every community deals with it in a different way. Okay, so today we are going to be looking into it and having a discussion. And as usual, the way we do, we will do our presentation and then we are going to stop the recording so that we can freely discuss the topic. All right. So the topic is gender-based violence. Yes, it's not something that we hear too often. Only a few people talk about it. Everyone in Canada, both male and female, experience violence. However, it's more predominant amongst girls and young women. They are the ones at the greater risk for violence. Violence can have long-lasting and negative health, social, and economic effects. And this effect spans from generation to generations, and this can lead to circles of violence and abuse within families and within some communities. When we talk about gender-based violence, oftentimes we think about physical violence, but it's not only about physical violence. It can be in a word form. It could be action. It could be an attempt to degrade somebody. It could be an attempt to control somebody. It could be an attempt to humiliate somebody, to intimidate, coerce, deprive, threaten, or harm another person. And it could take different forms, such as it could be cyber violence. I believe we had a workshop. Okay, I think it was with the other group. We had a workshop on cyber-based violence. It could be physical. Of course, that's one we all are familiar with. So whenever you hear about gender-based violence, that's always what comes to your mind, physical. It could be sexual. It could be societal, it could be psychological, it could be emotional, or it could be economic. And some other forms could be neglect or discrimination or even harassment. So these are the different forms in which gender-based violence presents themselves. So I am going to read you some key statistics on gender-based violence in Canada. And this whole information, I'm going to read it verbatim. It is from the Women and Gender Equality website, okay? They did this research, and I believe if you go to their website, you're going to see their references. So I'm not going to mention their references, but I'm letting you know that I'm reading verbatim from their website, the statistics that they present, okay? So one of the statistics they present is women in Canada are more likely than men to experience intimate partner violence. According to 2018 police reported data, women accounted for almost 8 in 10 victims of intimate partner violence. Also, women account for the vast majority of victims of intimate partner homicides. And according to police reported data as well, women accounted for close to 8 to 10 victims, that's 77% of this homicide violence, women. Also in Canada, women are more likely than men to be sexually assaulted. This is another form of violence, especially amongst the young ones, the young women. So between 2019 and 2014, 87% of police reported sexual assault victims were women or girls, most of whom were under the age of 25. Girls and young women in Canada are at a higher risk of experiencing a violent crime. In 2017, the rate of police-reported violent crimes in Canada was higher for girls and young women aged 24 and younger than their male counterparts. So it's amongst young women, mostly this takes place. Violence against females peaked overall at age 15. That's so sad, with a rate of 2,684 victims per 100,000 population. Girls and young women in Canada are also more likely to experience sexual offenses. In 2017, the rates for police-reported sexual offenses were much higher among girls and young women than boys and young men. The incident rate was 407 versus 58 incidents per 100,000 population. Also, police reported data showed that female children and youth in Canada were more likely to experience family violence in 2018 when compared to their male children and youth. So 327 versus 207 incidents per 100,000 population. And of the 18,965 child and youth, 17 years and younger, victims of family violence in Canada for that year, 60% of them were female. And while police reported data showed that the senior, now we're talking about the seniors now, that the senior women are less likely to experience violent victimization than the younger counterparts, they face unique challenges. So every age group, age category face different kind of violence. The challenges experienced unique to their age group. So for the seniors this time around, they face unique challenges which can limit their ability to access the justice system and related services. Family violence against seniors can have especially serious consequences for victims. Abuse is most often detected by those who interact with these seniors and are familiar with their typical behavior. Therefore, family violence against seniors may go unnoticed by members of the public or the police. Further, as seniors continue to age, their isolation can increase over time, increasing the likelihood that violence perpetrated against them will remain undetected. In 2018, police reported data indicated that women accounted for 58% of seniors who experienced family violence, and those senior women were most often victimized by their spouse. And between 2006 and 2016, 6 in 10, that's 62%, senior victims of family-related homicide were women. Among female victims, a spouse was most often the perpetrator, compared to 8% of male victims, while among the male victims, their child was most often the perpetrator, compared to 33% of female victims. Now, this statistics it's mind-blowing. But then whenever I think about the word violence and whenever I think about what causes it, there are so many factors, there are so many things that can cause violence in families. One of which is lack of knowledge, among so many other factors. And that is why our workshop, we're doing all these different topics in our workshop to be able to tackle it, because we believe in prevention. We believe in prevention is said to be better than cure. Once you have knowledge, once you know how to deal with yourself, once you know how to deal with people, once you know how to deal with situations, the tendency for violence to occur is very, very minimal. Last week, I believe we talked about relationship dynamics, which is very, very important. Once you know how to really, really relate to people in different capacities, violence will be minimal. And that is why today we chose to talk about it. So we do have a very great woman. It's a woman I've known for how many years now? It's been more than 20 years since we knew. We went to school together, actually. We went to secondary school together. It's a small world. After more than 20 years, we came back together I just communicated with her a few months ago when I realized that this area was her passion. She actually has a nonprofit organization that caters towards taking care of women, and especially battered women that undergo all the abuse and violence and all that stuff. So when I realized that this was an area of specialization among so many things, okay, she's a multi-talented woman. All right, so when I realized this was an area of specialization, and I'm like, okay, hey, come help us with this topic. All right, so we need to really look into it, and we need to see how we can try to prevent it. I know it's a huge topic. I'm not sure if she's going to be able to cover the whole thing, but let's see what I know she's just going to touch a tip of it, but let's start from somewhere and see how we can handle it. Remember, our goal is prevention, because violence is not good for anyone at all. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about her. I'm going to read her bio. Okay. Reverend Mimi was born into a Christian family and gave her life to Christ at a young age. Her mother modeled a part of Christianity for her and her siblings. She also instilled the value of hard work and education. She's an experienced professional in the research and development, medical device, pharmaceutical, and retail industry since 2001. She has worked at companies such as Biotechny, AbbVie, Abbott, and ALDI Corporate. She has several certifications such as LLSGB, which she can tell us what that means later on, ITIL, PMP, and is currently a consultant at her founding company, Paragon One Data, where she assists businesses and organizations in processing improvement initiatives. She was ordained a pastor at her church, at Church of Mount Fire International in 2014, and a reverend in 2020. She was previously an active member of Speak the Word Church International and Living Word Christian Center while living in Minnesota. She has a passion for helping women in stressful situations, particularly those who experience emotional and physical abuse. She is the founder of the nonprofit organization Haven for Divine Restoration, with a mission to empower women in need and rebuild life through education and mentorship, thus growing self-worth and esteem of women to create empowered, confident, and assured women. She believes in the sanctity of marriage and desires to see the restoration of healthy and faithful marriage relationships worldwide. In championing a solid premarital foundation, she became a certified Prepare Enrich facilitator. So let's welcome Reverend Mimi as she helps us with gender-based violence. Over to you, lady.
I have a PowerPoint presentation. Do you want? Can I share that?
Excellent. Yes, you can. Okay. You can screen share. Can you see the screen share button down?
Yes.
Yes. So you can go ahead.
It's going. Alrighty. And then I'm going to. Okay, I probably shouldn't have done that yet. Let me share the screen first. Can you see it? Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Can you still see it? All righty. So just a brief overview about what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about the introduction of gender-based violence, which would be the acronym GBV. We'll also see the statistics of gender-based violence, which of course, Dr. Blessing already mentioned some of them. Signs of potential violence, the effects of the violence, steps to mitigate that violence, and building best practices with men. So what is gender-based violence? It is a general term that is used to capture any type of violence that is rooted in unequal power relationships between genders. There are different forms of GBV, which include violence against women and girls. And as Dr. Ude had said, she said it's women disproportionately experience violence compared to men. Like there's even no comparison at all. A very common one is the intimate partner violence. It's common because most of these women suffer abuse and violence from those that are the closest to them, those they live with most especially. And we noticed that during the COVID pandemic, actually a lot of violence increased because people were locked up together, especially in 2020. So there was an increased reports of violence against domestic partners. The most common one we've heard about is domestic violence, and it's carried out by partners or family members. But domestic violence can also include children, it can include parents. So it's broader, but intimate partner violence is the one that is more common between spouses and intimate partners. We also have another one called sexual violence. It's a violence or a sexual act against women. It could also be against men, but it's usually unwanted sexual comments or advances or acts or traffic or anything that's directed towards a man or woman that is used with coercion or trying to force that activity against the individual that doesn't want it. So it's basically unwanted advances. Indirect structural violence and violence against LGBT people. I'm not going to touch much about this because you don't see this as much in Canada or in the Western world. You see this more, well, the first one is more common in the undeveloped world. And LGBT people, even though they do face it, it's not my specialty at all, so I'm not even going to touch it. But I just want to make it aware that this is a part of the violences that we do see. So these are the statistics of GBV in Canada, which of course, Dr. Blessner already talked about most of them. 44% of women have reported some form of psychological, physical, or sexual violence by an intimate partner. 67% of people in Canada have personally known at least one woman who has experienced physical or sexual abuse, which is so sad. 1 in 5 tweens, which are teens that are in between just getting to become teenagers, they have found that 1 in 5 of those know someone that has experienced dating violence. So even among the young people, it's becoming very, very common. Women are 5 times more likely than men to experience sexual assault. 1 woman is killed every 6 days by her intimate partner in Canada. Then women are 8 times more likely to be killed by a spouse or an intimate partner compared to men. Now, even though I gave you these statistics, I want to just mention that men do experience violence also, even though it's not really reported as much, but there are men who experience it. What are some of the signs? Now, this is written from a woman's perspective. What are some of the signs to look out for in a man or in a male to know whether or not this person will be violent? Science has shown that men are more violent than women. It should be men, not mean. Men are more violent than women. They express their aggression directly, and they're more likely to commit horrible acts and crimes. And if you look at most reports around the world of men who have done, people who have done terrible things, a high percentage is men. Why is that? Because they blame it on a hormone called testosterone. And besides testosterone, I think society is more, I would say, accepting of bad behavior from men because they just attribute it to a man being a man, and masculinity has to do with aggression. So I think these are one of the things that makes it more acceptable, which is really wrong, but it's just what it is. Here are some of the signs to look for when a man is prone to violence. Calls a woman names and insults them or puts them down, acts jealous or possessive and constantly accuses them of being unfaithful, stops them from seeing family members or friends, and tries to control what they eat, what they wear, or where they go to, threatens them with violence or a weapon, blames them for their violent behavior and tells them that they deserve it. And also they pressurize them to have sex or engage in sexual acts against their will. These are some of the signs that if a woman sees, they should know this man is going to be prone to gender-based violence. What are some of the effects of gender-based violence when a woman experiences it? What are some of the signs to look out for in a woman or a young girl to know whether or not she has experienced gender-based violence? One of the, I would say, the foremost telltale signs is depression and withdrawal, and also suicidal tendencies. When they've experienced gender-based violence, especially when it makes them feel there was nothing they could do about it, or an act was forced on them, they tend to get very depressed and they withdraw. Also, social isolation. They wouldn't want to do anything, or they become introverted if they were extroverted. And also they tend to just get away from all their friends. Then also another thing to see, especially with a young woman or girl, is the way they carry themselves changes, especially if they've experienced sexual violence. They start walking differently, or they might complain about pain in that area. So these are some of the signs that would show they've experienced gender-based violence. Also, fearfulness. They become exaggerated in the way they respond to triggers or they are easily startled. These are some of the signs to show that they've experienced that. There could also be a sudden or extreme shift in moods or emotions. They might get very irritable easily. They might show anger, they might show rage. Sometimes they're not even that kind of person. But when things are bottled up because they're afraid to talk about it usually, then these are some of the expressions that it comes out as. Another thing to look out for, especially with domestic violence, physical domestic violence, is bruises, scratches, and marks. It's very visible with people who have experienced, women who have experienced gender-based violence. Another telltale sign is inability to concentrate or focus on a specific task. They might get very distracted. And usually they're not that kind of person, but because there's so much weighing on their minds, they tend to think about what happened and they're not able to focus on what they're doing. Then one of the most extreme effects of gender-based violence is they may start to use drugs or alcohol in an attempt to drown out or block out what they experience. They think alcohol or drugs will help them forget about it. And this is one of the more extreme cases where when someone gets to that stage, they need intervention because it's something that is heavily weighing on them and they don't know how to talk about it. So if anyone notices some of these signs, it's best to try and talk to that person and see how you can offer assistance. What are some of the steps to mitigate gender-based violence? This picture was shared on a Men Engage website. It included the 6 steps that men should take so that they will not be perpetrators of violence. However, when I looked at it, I thought it was a good thing to share with women also. Why? Because what's good for the goose is good, or what's good for the goose is good for the gander. What's good for men would be good for women. So these are some of the signs they talked about. Some of the things they talked about. Number 1, they were telling the men, know your emotional triggers. What sets you off? What makes you get angry? What makes you feel overwhelmed, disrespected, or entitled, insecure, or ashamed? What are these things that set you off? They're asking the men to look at that because usually they're triggers that make men begin the whole path of violence. Even though they were talking to men, I thought this would be good for women also. What are some of the triggers that makes a woman feel she should accept certain behaviors from men? Does she feel insecure? Is there low self-esteem? What is it? So I feel women too should look at some of the triggers that makes them be prone to be victims of domestic violence. The second one was notice the warning steps. Does stress increase violence? What about negative thoughts? I think women also should look for that.
Sorry, Rebecca, please, may I interrupt you?
Sure.
I forgot something, but thank God that Ms. Mate just reminded me we're supposed to do a poll. So if you don't mind, please, assume you have not heard us talk about GBV, please. I want you to respond to this poll, please. Okay. So assume you've not heard her talk about, you've not heard me mention it at all. You just came into this workshop right now. Please take this poll. Thank you, Ms. Mate. Just one more minute.
Dr. Blessing, for number 3, it's just yes. We put yes?
Yes, either yes or no.
Okay.
Yeah, yes or no. Okay. All right, please, you can go ahead. Thank you.
All righty. So I think we're on step 2.
Sorry about
Notice the
that.
warning steps. So what are some of the things? Could it be stress? Could it be an increased heart rate? Negative thoughts? Usually there are things that trigger it. And once they're triggered, there are signs that follow. So they were telling the men, once you notice these signs, be aware of them. Number 3, stop. An acronym for stop, obviously. Then the next one is the T, take a deep breath. Because usually when you take a deep breath, it makes you stop. It makes you pause on what you're doing. Then the next one is O, consider your options. What are my options? If I hit this woman, what's going to happen to me? Then the last one, proceed. After you've thought about it, then proceed. And most times, if you've considered options, we're hoping you make the right choices. So even though it says stop and it's talking about it's geared towards men, I think for women too, the same thing applies. Stop. What am I doing to trigger this man? Now, I'm not trying to say there's an excuse for a man hitting a woman, but sometimes women do things that trigger men. Some of them intentionally do these things to get a rise out of men, which is wrong. So a woman too should stop. Take a deep breath. Consider the options. If I keep pushing the buttons of this man, how is he going to react? Will I like what I get? Will I like if I become a victim? Then finally proceed. Hopefully it means step away, step back, stop what you're doing. Number 4, take time out. I think this is one of the very important ones. If you take a time out, step away from that environment. What can I do to take myself out of it? Because I know if I stay here, most likely I will do something I'm going to regret. Take a time out. Both parties, but this is addressing men. Take a time out. Get away. Don't do what you want to do. The same thing with the woman. Take a time out. Don't push his buttons. Don't run your mouth. Don't trigger things in him that would cause him to do the wrong thing. I'm not trying to say the man should blame the woman for his actions. Everyone should take responsibility. But at the same time, I think it goes both ways. The 5th one, self-care. Most likely, if you're in a good state of, if you take care of yourself, you'll be in a better state of mind. You will tend to make the right decisions. Negative thoughts usually trigger some of these actions. But if someone has like an outlet, like it says, talk with a trusted friend. If there's something bothering someone, instead of bottling everything up, talk to someone. When you get things out of you, you would most likely not do the wrong thing. Or if you talk with someone who is more learned or experienced in that aspect, they would most likely give you advice that would help keep you out of trouble. Then finally, be accountable. I always say take responsibility. I'm not trying to say a man should act the way he wants to act because a woman triggered it. No, both parties should be responsible. Apologize if you've done something wrong. But most times I always say prevention is better than cure. So especially with a man, don't hit so you don't have to come back and apologize. Some injuries can actually be permanent. It cannot be reversed. And like if you say something wrong, you might be able to say, I'm sorry. But if you hit and there's injury, most likely the scar will be there forever. It will always trigger that remembrance of what happened. So be accountable. Take responsibility. It goes both ways. The woman too should be accountable. If I do a certain thing, how will it end up? What if I get hurt? What if I die in extreme cases? What happens? So I think if they're accountable, most likely they won't do the wrong thing. And it also mentions act with integrity. integrity is doing the right thing, no matter what. And the right thing is step away from toxic situations. Hold your mouth. Don't say things that will trigger someone else to act inappropriately. The next slide is building best practices with men. I think the first thing is every woman needs to know her worth and have a conviction about their values. If you know that, most of the decisions you will make will be based on that. Any woman who feels she's deserving of respect, of honor, who feels I'm dignified, I don't have to take certain things, they most likely will have values that they will stick to. Second one, set standards and boundaries. Standards are based on values. And you tell yourself, there are certain things I will not accept, certain things I will not take. When I was in Minnesota, I was working I was like volunteering with an African man who was trying to start a TV station. So there were a bunch of us from different backgrounds. And this girl, she's half Persian and half, I want to say, is it Sierra Leonean or Liberian? I'm not sure, but an African country. Beautiful, gorgeous girl. And there was a guy, we're all sitting together, and this guy, we're talking, and he just said, I said something, I was like, oh, shut up. And I took offense to it. I was like, no, don't tell me shut up. And he was joking, but because of the values I set, I said, no, don't tell me shut up. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, I was just joking. I said, no, I think that's rude. So the girl looked at me and she was shocked. She was like, oh my God, that was just a joke. So after the whole thing, she came to meet me and she's like, Mimi, I was so impressed. Just him telling you shut up, that was wrong for you. I said, yeah, because I have my values and my standards. And she said, oh my God, I wish I could be like you. And then we started talking and I found out that she has been abused. Men have put her down. I mean, you see this girl, she's gorgeous, beautiful curly hair because she's biracial. And she's like, men have put her down. They've called her all kinds of names and she's just taking it. But when you dig deep down, it's because she had a low self-esteem. So that's why I built a friendship with her based on just that little thing. But because I had set boundaries and values and standards, I refused to bend for anyone. And just based on that interaction, I was able to help somebody else that was like accepting abuse and violence from men. The third one, know what you desire and what you want. If that person doesn't fit that profile, do not feel pressured to go forward with the relationship. If you know you want a man who is loving, who is kind, or even as an African person, you want a man who would actually help you with cooking or cleaning. If that's what you desire, there's nothing wrong with that. Don't change it or accept it just because somebody else doesn't fit it. Because at the end of it, if you enter a relationship with this person and the person is not doing what you truly like, most likely you will get what's what I'm looking for? You get tired and irritable. So I believe if there's certain things you desire, there's nothing wrong with them. Hold on to it and be verbal about it. Then if meeting for the first time, like a date, I would always say, meet in a public or group setting. That way you don't put yourself in a compromising situation where you might not be able to get help if you need it, because you never know somebody. They might act or talk a certain way, but when there's no one there, you might see a different picture. So always make sure there are other people when you meet someone for the first time. No means no. Do not move forward with any activity you're uncomfortable with. Go with your instincts. They always say women have an instinct. If you feel funny about someone, if you feel something doesn't sit quite right, go with it. And if you tell someone, please don't call me this, Or if you tell someone, please don't touch me here, and the person wants to go forward, no is no. You have every right to say, please stop it. And the person should respect your request if they truly value you for who you are. The next point would be, do not excuse rude or poor behavior, as men will be men. Stopping gender-based violence begins with awareness and refusal to accept this behavior, period. This has gone on for years because society has accepted this behavior. They have always said, oh, men will be men are just aggressors. You know, it all goes back to the beginning of times, how they were the hunters. They go for what they want. You can go for what you want. There's nothing wrong with it. You can go for what you want career-wise or a business, but not when a woman says, no, please don't have sex with me. That's rape. So that behavior should not be excused. It should not be accepted. Then finally, be vocal about your expectations and don't be afraid to lay them out. Standing your ground doesn't mean you're being rigid. It means you're valuing yourself because you know your worth. And I believe that's the last slide. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. That's a great presentation. So we are going to be going into the question discussion section. I'm going to stop recording, but before then, I'm going to launch a poll again before I forget. I'm going to launch the second poll.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing.
Yes, excellent. So you can please go ahead and do that. Great presentation, by the way, Reverend Mimi. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow.
So we are going to stop recording and I'll give them room for questions. So I'm going to stop recording now. So please feel free to